staggering 10 million plus people have lost their jobs in the United States in the past 2 weeks alone. Roughly 3.3 million the week before last week. Last week, over 6.6 million people in the United States lost their job. And previous to that 3.3 million, obviously the 6.6 is a new record for a 1 week unemployment loss in the U.S. Previous to that 3.3 million, the most that we had experienced in a 1 week period, I believe, was somewhere around, 6 or 800,000, somewhere in the 1980s. And yet politicians, corporate Democrat politicians, corporatists like Joe Biden still think healthcare, health insurance should be tied to your employer. What do you got to say to those 10 million people, Joe, that have lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks? Many millions of them who will be without health care now. What do you say to them? Well, some people like their employer-backed health care that they get from their jobs. Okay, what happens when they get fired in the middle of a pandemic and they don't have access to health care? I mean, it's freaking ridiculous, and he's still doubling down on the talking point, saying, well, having Medicare for all, universal health care wouldn't have really fundamentally changed anything, wouldn't really have helped out that much. They had it in Italy, and they still have the virus there, and this and that, and just making all these excuses. And obviously, it's very disingenuous, the rationale he's giving, saying why he doesn't support it. And then it's the simple fact, there was a 17-year-old teenager in California last week who was turned away from a hospital. He was experiencing coronavirus symptoms. He was turned away because he didn't have health insurance. They told him to go to a public hospital. On the way there, driving to the public hospital, he had a fucking heart attack, died 6 hours later. So, Joe, it would have helped that person. What do you say to that person's family? Well, it wouldn't have really helped because, well, Of course, Medicare for all is not going to completely fix or stop pandemics from happening. But guess what? If you get sick, you would be able to get tested. You would be able to get treated, not have to worry about coming out of the fucking hospital with $35,000 to $75,000 in medical bills and medical debt, leading to more bankruptcies. We already have on average around 500,000 people each year going bankrupt due to medical bills. I mean, it's ridiculous. Obviously, healthcare should be free at the point of service. Nobody should be having to worry about getting shackled with tens and thousands of dollars of medical debt because they get sick, whether it be from the coronavirus, or they have a heart attack, or they have cancer, or they have some type of autoimmune disease, or they get in a car wreck, or they have a traumatic brain injury, whatever it is. They break their arm skateboarding, bicycling, whatever. You go to the hospital, you should be able to get treated, not having to worry about just being absolutely crushed with huge debt. It's insane. It's insane. It would be saving people's lives right now. People wouldn't have to worry about, oh shit, I kind of have really shitty insurance, or I don't have insurance, or I'm an undocumented folk. If I go to the hospital, I could be charged all kinds of money. They might not take my insurance. All of this fucking bullshit goes away. People get sick, they are able to get treated and to get the help that they need. They would be able to get tested for free for the coronavirus and all this shit, and not have to worry about some freaking decree from the federal government negotiating with these for-profit rapacious healthcare companies. I mean, it's just completely ridiculous. And again, a vast majority of Democratic voters support Medicare for all, a single-payer healthcare system where medical care is free at the point of service. Joe Biden doesn't support that. He's not even pretending to, and this is during a goddamn fucking pandemic. I mean, it is absolutely just, I don't know, very troubling that people are supporting Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders, the candidate who for decades has been on the front lines advocating and fighting that healthcare needs to be considered a human right as it is in every other industrialized country in the world except the United States. And guess what? We pay about twice as much as any other developed country for our healthcare, and we have these horrible outcomes. We have, relatively high, infant mortality, lower life expectancy, and we also, we have around 80 million people in the US who are either underinsured or have no insurance. And yet we spend outrageous amounts on healthcare because it's for profit. It goes to these for profit hospitals, these for profit health insurance companies, the pharmaceutical industries to pad their bottom line. And yet when we get into a pandemic, they don't have any reserve supplies of ventilators or masks or anything like that because they treat it as a business. It should be treated as a public good, obviously. I mean, it's nuts. And again, people are supposedly voting for Joe Biden because they think he's the electability candidate. I mean, that's a bunch of bullshit if you believe that. I have a bridge I would like to sell you. I mean, Iraq War, NAFTA, wanting to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the bankruptcy bill, this new sexual assault allegation towards Joe Biden by a former staffer, the very serious and sad cognitive decline, and he doesn't support Medicare for all during a pandemic. I mean, the list is long and illustrious of how horrible of a politician Joe Biden is, and yet the mainstream media has done such a good job convincing people that he's the electability candidate. That, I mean, unless a real miracle happens, he's going to become the Democratic nominee. And even during a pandemic and the health and economic crisis that we're experiencing, he's still going to have a really tough time defeating Donald Trump. And Trump has gone to the left of him on many issues. I hear rumblings that Trump might possibly expand Medicaid coverage at this point to cover roughly 30 million more Americans during this pandemic. And here Joe Biden is, still saying how bad Medicare for all is and how it wouldn't help during this time. Obviously, it's completely ridiculous and insane. And again, Joe Biden does not care if you live or you die. Before the Arizona, Florida, and Illinois primaries, Joe Biden and his team, his surrogates, were going around mainstream media saying it's safe. Nope, you can go out there and vote. Don't worry about the CDC recommendations about social distancing and all that stuff. You're good to go. All I care about is your vote. I don't care if you contract COVID-19 and kill yourself and, infect your community members and maybe kill some of them too. I don't give a shit. I just want to get elected. Joe Biden 2020. He's doing the same thing now with the Wisconsin primary that's being held next week on April 7th. It's just hugely, hugely disgusting. The only candidate, including President Trump, who actually cares about the working people and making lives better for the average person in the United States is obviously Bernie Sanders. And it's just, really sad and disappointing to again and again see people vote against their own self-interest, especially older folks. Again, Joe Biden seems to do better with that population for whatever reason. I honestly don't know why, because his policies are horribly detrimental to older folks. He's advocated multiple times, very passionately in fact, that he's wanted to cut Social Security. Kind of important for older folks, so the more vulnerable and low income ones aren't eating cat food. Joe Biden's okay with older folks eating cat food. I mean, Jesus Christ, do the distinctions need to be any more obvious? I don't know. People just need to fucking wake up, I guess. I don't know. Those are my thoughts, but I mean, it's fucking tough. 10 million people have lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks. Most of them had health insurance through their employment, through their employer provided health insurance. They're fired. They're shit out of luck now. What are they going to do? Go fucking try to get Cobra that could be thousands of dollars a month? Or what if they make too much and they're not going to be able to get on Medicaid? At least Trump's supposedly talking about expanding that, and Joe Biden's just spouting off fucking bullshit about how Medicare for all wouldn't help people during a fucking pandemic. This is just insanity. And again, it would be, very nice to see people actually voting based on the policies that these candidates support. If you're a Joe Biden supporter and you're watching this video, I would really love to hear what policy positions that Joe Biden has that you support over Bernie Sanders. Not just give me some stupid platitude about electability, because I think that's a crock of shit. Anyways, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Peace.